Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are listening to this or watching this in the world. And we're back with another author interview. And today, yet again, another fascinating book. And we've got Steve Smith with us, the business doctor. And first of all, just welcome, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richard. Pleasure to be
Yeah,
on. Yeah,
great to
great.
have
Thank
you
you.
here. And I was really taken by your book, which obviously we're going to talk about. The title being Leadership, Levity, and the Power of Baked Alaska. Simple ways to lead people and build business. So, as I say, Steve, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think, first of all, you could introduce yourself far better than I could give a bio or anything like that. So, do you want to give us a synopsis of your kind of career and background and things before we move on to the book?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from the northwest of England, St Helens, which is between Liverpool and Manchester. Although we're sort of neither Mancunians nor Scousers, as it were, we're very much our own people.
Yeah.
So I lived there all my life. I went to university in Sheffield to do business studies, and one of the best things that happened to me in life was meeting a pal called Stevie McKim, who was from Belfast, and
Yeah.
we've been great friends ever since. Which is obviously how I've got to know yourself through one of Stevie's other friends, Jeff. So
Yeah.
that's brilliant. University was great, thoroughly enjoyed it, and set me up for life with some great friends, as I've said, and also into my career, where after graduating, I joined Procter and Gamble in the sales department. Spent a decade there. Brilliant company. Everybody knows and uses products like Fairy Liquid and Pampers and Head and Shoulders and things. Great training as well. Thoroughly enjoyed it. After 9 or 10 years, I needed a change, but I didn't want to travel away from home too far. So an opportunity came up to go to Kellogg's, which was a similar US-owned multinational brand leader. And again, another great company. Spent 5 years there working on cereals and snack bars, and great fun with the characters of their brand, like Tony the Tiger and Snap, Crackle and Pop
Yeah.
and Cocoa Monkey and things. So that, I've always been a bit of a child at heart. So that was great fun at Kellogg's. And then I spent 15 years working for an iconic British brand, Iron Brew, the famous made in Scotland from girders, which huge brand in Scotland.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the few places in the world where Coca-Cola isn't the undisputed number one drink. Brand with a great personality, great sense of fun.
Yeah.
So I had 15 years there, which I really enjoyed. And then the last couple of years, my career's taken a little bit of a different turn. And now I'm working for myself as a business doctor, which is a franchise that I invested in to work with local businesses and SMEs in my home area around the sort of St Helens and Wigan area. So really enjoying that. Very different than
Yeah.
being in the big corporate world, but all the training and experience that I had in the big corporate world, I can now use for working with local businesses and a great variety of local businesses as well. So that's really exciting, and I'm really enjoying it. And you're going to ask the question, well, where did Baked Alaska come from?
Well, before that, I mean, I found your background so interesting. One of the things that really sort of highlighted for me is whenever we, and I'm sure listeners will identify with this, whenever we walk into a supermarket and we see, as you say, the likes of Kellogg's or Pampers or whatever it may be on the shelves, and we throw them in our trolley, do our weekly shop, we sort of take it for granted a little bit. And we don't really realize the work and the sales and the relationships and the management that goes on behind the scenes to get those items into our trolleys. So that was just something that I picked up. But yes, absolutely. The first question, and I'm sure it's the first question that everybody asks, the book, The Power of Baked Alaska. Why is Baked Alaska mentioned in the title?
Well, I'm not really going to tell you because
No.
it's
So you have to read the
something you
book.
get from reading the book. But I'll just go back to the point you did make, which is a really good point about when you do go in a supermarket and you don't realize the chain of events that goes all the way through from a company like P&G or Kellogg's making the product all the way through to it being on the supermarket shelf for you to buy. And I think one thing that really sort of brought that home a little bit in 2020, obviously at the start of the pandemic and the first lockdown, when supermarket shelves were bare and empty, and the supply chain was put under such massive pressure that what we completely take for granted in the availability of food and products, just, suddenly was a real wake-up call for people that, hey, this is what can happen when something unexpected happens and you suddenly can't get toilet paper.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people remember from it, the absolute dearth and shortage of toilet paper on shelves. People were queuing up for the stuff and putting it on rations. And so basic products like that, which is really where I've spent my career, you're absolutely right that there's an incredible process and series of events that gets them into people's homes. And there's quite a few funny stories that exist through that process. So that's one of the things that are captured in the book. But
Yeah.
the actual Baked Alaska, originally the book was going to be called The Power of the Pizza.
Right.
And then as I developed it, I ended up hitting on Baked Alaska. I wanted to just call it Baked Alaska. But the problem with that was if you put it on Amazon or for SEO reasons, you'd end up in the cookery section and that was going to be a problem. So I had to expand the title a little bit to give people a flavour of what it was about. And it is mostly about leadership and how leadership can then help build business.
Yeah.
And the Baked Alaska bit, to say a little bit about that, it's just an example of something that is relatively small and trivial in the grand scheme of things, but yet had a really powerful and positive effect on myself.
Yes.
And the power of Baked Alaska really is just really about listening to people, understanding what motivates them and what means something to them, and then being able to sort of use that in a positive way.
Yeah. No, I love that story, and definitely will leave that story for people to get hold of whenever they read the book. But yeah, as you say, it's the small things that count. So before we delve into the book a bit more, I want to talk a little bit about the process of writing it. Like throughout your career, had you thought of writing a book, or how did that all come about?
Absolutely what you've just said, to be honest. The book was in my mind for about 30 years, literally.
Wow.
From
Yeah.
from starting my business career at P&G. I remember one day, and I've told this story a few times, and I'll try not to elongate it too much, but basically we used to have these meetings where there'd be quite a few people and a buffet lunch would be put on. And you'd get to the lunch break and everyone would go and look at the buffet and they'd peel back the corner of the sandwich and say, "Oh, don't like that one, it's got cucumber on it," or "Oh, don't like mayonnaise," or
Yeah.
then they'd grab a handful of crisps and say, "Oh God, the cheese and onion, I don't like them."
Yeah.
And they'd pick a little bit at this buffet and then drift off for half an hour or however long the lunch break was, and then come back to the meeting. And one day it was my turn to sort of organise the meeting, and I just thought, "I don't really want one of those drab, awful buffets. Well, let's do something different." So the team who arranged the logistics of the meeting, I just said, "Look, can we do something different? Can we get some pizzas in? Can we order some pizzas in for a change?" And they said, "Well, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll give that a try." So they ordered from Pizza Hut. Didn't have a buffet, ordered from Pizza Hut. And there's probably about 60 people in this office, probably about 30 of them in the meeting. And the doors to the office opened at lunchtime and the pizzas were brought in. And this smell of fresh pizza started to circulate around the office. And everyone's sniffing up, "Oh, what's that? Oh, that smells nice. Oh, what's that?" And then the pizzas were put in the canteen area. And everybody came for some. Everyone in the meeting, everyone else around the office, all of a sudden, everyone, you know, sniffed the way through to where these pizzas were and then
Brilliant.
stood around grabbing a slice of pizza, having a drink, nattering, talking to each other, interacting, and the energy in the room. I just remember thinking, wow, this is fantastic. This is the power of the pizza. It's brought everyone together. People who didn't normally talk to each other or were in different departments were suddenly having a natter while they munched on the pizza.
Yeah.
And I just thought, there's something in this. There's something for managers in this. The
Brilliant.
pizza has got great power to bring people together. And I always thought, one day I'm going to capture all my learnings and experiences and put them in a book and call it The Power of the Pizza.
Yeah. And so why did the Power of the Pizza title change?
Just because I just liked the Baked Alaska bit. I just
Yeah.
thought it was, and as you say, you've read the book, so you know the story. I just thought there was just something a little bit more to that, because it was sort of more of a one-to-one thing. And yes, the pizza is really powerful for bringing people together and creating energy and a sense of community. But the Baked Alaska was more of a one-to-one. It was more of
Yeah.
a something one person did for another that
Yeah.
showed just real thought and understanding, albeit it wasn't a major thing.
Yeah.
So I just thought, yeah, I'll go with the idea of the Baked Alaska.
And it definitely does. And hopefully this conversation is providing, or having a bit of intrigue with people, because for sure I was wondering, and then when I got to the story, it's like, that's the title. That's why we've got the title. So yeah, it was really cool that. So I just want to ask you about the process. How did you find that? The actual writing process, fitting that into a busy schedule. Did
Well,
people help you, or how did you play all that?
that's where opportunity knocked, I suppose. I did
Yeah.
it all myself, because basically I'd had all these ideas in my head. I had made a few scribbled notes from time to time down the years, but you're talking about probably about a dozen pages. Nothing
Yeah.
significant. And I came out of a role after I'd left Bar Soft Drinks as sales director. I got another role quite quickly with a business based in Blackburn, which I was enjoying. It wasn't really my sort of product type of category, but I was
Yeah.
enjoying it. But all of a sudden, I was quite surprised and shocked at the time. But they just, basically fired me and said,
Right.
we don't want you anymore. Which was just before my probation period was up as well. So they didn't have to give me any
Uh,
uh, financial cushion or anything. So it was all of a
Keepers.
sudden I had this like, oh, right, okay, I've got no job. What am I
Yeah.
going to do? And I started to look at other roles. And my wife had always said to me, my wife's always had far more confidence in my abilities than I have had myself, to be honest. And she said, well, why don't you work for yourself? Why don't you just set up and work for yourself? You know. So I registered a company, called it Higher Plane Consulting, because I live on Higher Lane, and it was just a nice easy play on words there.
Yeah.
And I started to look for some contract work. I got a great contract with a great company up in the Lake District called the Lakes Distillery, and they make English whiskey. Now I'm a
Right.
great lover of Black Bush and Bushmills,
Yeah.
Irish
Yeah.
whiskey. Scottish whiskey is obviously the bigger player in the market, and there's some great products there. But I've always liked my Irish whiskey, and I wasn't even aware that English whiskey was made. To be
No.
honest, but
Yeah.
apparently I think there's about a dozen distilleries opened up around the country now in England.
Right.
And I got this work with the Lakes Distillery. It was great. Yeah, small team. I was helping the sales director with his strategy and his plan, and doing a bit of selling and that as well. And I was quite enjoying it. And it was 3 or 4 month contract, which could potentially have been extended.
Yeah.
And then the lockdown came.
Yeah.
And after 3 weeks, everyone was put on furlough, and those who were on contracts, unfortunately, the contracts were ripped up. So
Yeah.
for the second time in a couple of months, I suddenly thought, oh, right, what am I going to do now? So
Yeah.
I suddenly thought to myself, right, I'm going to need to do something here. So I thought about this book for a long time. I'm currently not engaged in any 9 to 5 work. So it's now or never. Go for it.
Brilliant. Yeah.
If I don't do it now, I never will.
Yeah.
So I just literally battered the hell out of my keyboard for about 12 weeks or so, and
Yeah.
just got as much of it down as I could.
Uh-huh.
And the book was born.
Wow. And in terms of that schedule, how long per day would you have done, or did you find that difficult to get into flow, or did it flow really well, or how did that all work?
It was a bit of both, to be honest, Richard, because I was obviously looking at applying for jobs and things like that in that
Yeah.
time.
Sure.
And that was the time when business doctors, we'll probably talk about later, had
Yeah.
approached me about getting involved with them. So I had other things to do, but some days I'd literally just get up and go straight to the keyboard and just literally type all day. Other days I wouldn't do as much.
Yeah.
Sometimes I couldn't get to sleep and thoughts would go round in my head. So I had this wall covered in post-it notes with
Uh-huh.
just thoughts and ideas and concepts and things I'd remembered that I just plastered up onto the wall.
Yeah.
And then once I'd got everything in, I had to think about, right, well, how am I going to structure this? It can be biographical and go from sort of being a child through to where I am now.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that was the right way to do it. I didn't want it to be the story of Steve Smith. It needed to be a business book that had a structure and a purpose. And right back to my early days with Procter and Gamble, they always assessed their managers in kind of two broad ways. One was what you did to build the organization, so the leadership and people things, and then the other was what you did to build the business, which
Sure.
obviously working in sales was, how much
Yeah.
you'd sold and distribution of your products into Asda and Tesco and places like that. So I thought, yeah, that's a good way of structuring it. So essentially, I'm going to structure it into the people side of things, and then the business side of things. And one would capture learnings and experiences about leading people, about developing people, coaching, training, etc. And the other would be about the interactions I've had with, the grocers and the wholesalers in the UK, which,
Yeah.
there's some they're very tough operators, they're very successful, very sophisticated operators, but there's also been some sort of, quite difficult scenarios to negotiate with them.
Yeah.
So that's how I decided to split it up.
Brilliant. And I must say, the power of story, because your experience is so vast and over such a long period of time, for me, that's what brings it to life. It's not just like a leadership or a strategy book with lots of theory and lots of this and that. The stories really bring it to life. So I thought that was really, really good. And then the other thing that's really good, I love the section, each chapter as the section points to ponder. And I'm going to pick up on one of those now and ask you about it, because this is probably the one that really jumped out at me the most. And actually, I did mention this to Jeff. We had a brief conversation about this just the other day. So it's this one. Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Can you talk to us a bit about that? I find that so, when I thought about that, I was like, that's really profound in a way, but so true as well.
Well, I can't take credit for that one.
Yeah.
The actual quote came, I saw that on LinkedIn from the female lead, which is one of the groups on LinkedIn that I follow. It just popped up ages ago, and I just thought, yeah, that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I always saw in my career was I've always just treated everyone the same, from a secretary or cleaner almost all the way up to the chief exec. I mean, you do moderate your behavior a little bit, but the principle for me is you say hello to all of them. You don't just say hello to the people that you think are important. Everyone's equal in that sense, the people. So you say hello to people and you treat people the same. You give them that same level of courtesy and decency, whatever job they're doing, whatever level they're at. Why should you be more courteous and deferential to the leader at the top and not be sort of courteous and respectful to the person at the bottom, if you like? That's just how I've always been. So, I always, in the teams that I ran, made sure that sort of the secretarial resources, for example, were included in everything. Whereas some people would run team meetings, but the secretaries would stay in the office. And you're like, well, that's not right. They're part of the team as well. And so when I saw that quote, I just thought, yeah, that's spot on. In business, there's a lot of cynical people. There's a lot of people who basically just evaluate everyone and think, what can they do for me? How are they going to help me get ahead? And if they don't see that they can do that, then they'll ignore them. Or perhaps even worse than ignore them, they'll actually treat them in a disparaging way. And I've just absolutely no time for that. I just think it's wrong, it's rude, it's discourteous. Why do that? And if you want to be a little bit more analytical about it, you can think, okay, well, someone who comes in as a junior, may end up one day being your boss. And there's a great example I can share about that. There's a picture in the book. It's the one that talks about the wild geese, which is that's a nickname for one of the teams that I led. And in that picture is a chap called Greg Jackson. And Greg was great. He was part of my team. He was good fun. He was really creative, really bright, really good guy to work with. A couple of months ago, another chap from Northern Ireland, actually, Clark McElroy, who was also on that photo, who now runs Red Star brand. He's back in Northern Ireland now. Clark sent me an email of an article on the BBC, and he said, "Oh, check this out." And the article said, CEO of 1.3 billion energy company doesn't have an HR department, or words to that effect. So I read this article, and it was quite interesting. It was like, the philosophy was that there was great trust and transparency within the team, and they didn't need HR for a lot of things because they could just resolve things between themselves. There might be specialist things that they would bring an HR consultant in for, but basically this 1.3 billion business doesn't have an HR department. And that business is Octopus Energy. And the founder and CEO of Octopus Energy is Greg Jackson. Greg was part of my team nearly 30 years ago in Procter & Gamble, and I just thought, that's absolutely fantastic, Greg's gone on, what an incredible achievement, in terms of setting up that business and, the value that it's worth. But the way he runs that business is very much the kind of principles and values that we adopted within that wild geese team, as we called it at P&G all those years ago. And I just thought that's absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant.
So, character, what if I had have just viewed Greg at the time as a junior member of the team and not treated him with the respect that I did more senior people? What would he then have thought of me in years to come?
Yeah.
So, I think that's really important. That character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you, because one, it's a bit naive because you never know what they might be able to do for you in the future, but it's just decency, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And isn't it said as well, if you go out for dinner or to a cafe, you can tell a lot about somebody about how they treat the staff behind the counter or the waiter or the waitress. And I found that to be true myself, sometimes whenever you experience that. And I found this whole leadership style or the whole leadership section for me, because of my background, because of working, on board boats and obviously places where leadership is so critical, I find this section so fascinating. So I want to ask you just about your memories. Obviously we've touched on it a little bit, but for you, what would be a memory that really stands out of good leadership, perhaps other than baked Alaska?
Other than baked Alaska, I think it's being listened to, it's being respected. There's a couple of things I put in the book, things that I've borrowed from other people, like Glenn Leibovitz's traits of a great leader. And I love the way he writes it because he just writes it in plain English. It's just, you can look it up in the book, but it's just nicely written. It's just everyday language rather than trying to make leadership into something that's all sort of complicated and complex.
Yeah.
And I just, again, I think the basic building blocks of leadership are courtesy and decency.
Yeah.
Start with that. Start with good manners. Because it's not going to do you any harm. Don't show decency and courtesy to people, and why would they then go the extra mile for you if you're in the leadership role if you don't treat them well? So that's just for me very much a basic. And when you do get a little bit more into the leadership theory, the model that we had at P&G was called the 3 E's, about envision, have an idea of where you're trying to get to and what you're trying to achieve, enable, give people the tools and the skills to be able to do it, and then crucially is energize, which is make sure that they're motivated and up for it. And you get a lot of leaders who might have great vision, and they might enable the team, but if they can't energize them, you're not going to get anywhere. And that whole energizing thing is the real people bit, I suppose, which is the understanding the people, the motivating the people, making them want to come on the journey with you, and put all their effort into achieving the same thing that you're aiming to achieve. So I think that model's nice and simple, just 3 E's, but it's a good model that works. You can expand it to 5 E's. You can probably just keep going with that and come up with all manner of different ideas and models. But those 3, having an idea of where you're trying to get to, giving people the tools to get there, and then encouraging them and motivating them to actually want to do it, I think just works really, really well.
And what do you think about upbringing, past experience, culture from people's past? How do you think that influences them as a leader?
I think it can have a big influence. Yeah, I mean, I touch on the book in the a leader's born not made sort of thing, and I think it's a bit of both. Leadership can be taught and trained, and good behaviours can be reinforced, but some people will always struggle with people. You get some people who are good with people and some people who aren't good with people, and that's always going to be a little bit of a struggle for some people. So some are sort of born more natural leaders, if you like. They go through life captaining the school team and things at university or whatever, or just in they just organize and generally sort of help other people in that way, just generally. But I think for me, background does have, for me personally, did have a big role. I'm from the northwest of England. I think one of the reasons I've always got on with with Northern Irish people so well is
Yeah.
because, you know, it's down to earth. You know,
Yeah.
you tell it as it is. We're quite open, we're quite transparent, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes too much. You know, I was often told during my career, oh, you know, you're too open, you wear your heart on your sleeve, you know, you'll never get to the very top. And probably right, actually. You know, did well to get sales director, but there's people who've worked with me, like Gregor mentioned, and many others who have gone way past me in their careers. And, you know, good luck to them. I'm, you know, delighted for them. So long as they treat people well along the way.
Yeah.
And, you know, those guys do that I'm referring to, then I'm absolutely delighted for them. I was always brought up, you know, to have good manners and to not be arrogant or big-headed. You know, modesty was seen as a virtue, and I think you've got to be careful with that one because, you know, if you are going to be successful and you are going to be a leader, you can't be too modest. You
Yeah.
know, people do need to look up to you. You don't have to be the best at everything. You don't
Yeah.
always have to have the answer for everything, but you need to have a level of credibility. You know, people need to have some confidence in you going forward.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that served me quite well in my leadership roles. It might not have taken me to the very, very top, but there's probably other reasons why I've not got to the very, very top. You know, and you get to the point in life where you think, well, you don't just measure success by money.
Yeah.
Even the billionaires, I don't think they measure success by how much actual wealth
No.
they've got. It's just a currency. It's, you
Yeah.
know, if someone's worth 1.3 billion and then ends up worth 1.7 billion, what are they going to do with that extra
No.
400 million? Not a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
But as an actual measurement, it says, okay, well, I'm more successful.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that what will they go out and spend the 400 million on. It's the fact that they have moved from 1.3 billion to 1.7 billion
Yeah.
is the measure of success. And there's other ways of measuring success. And you know, one of the, you know, you used the phrase before. I thought long and hard about how I should describe the little lessons at the end of each chapter. I didn't want to call them lessons. I didn't want to call them, you know, things to do, because
Yeah.
my style was a little bit more, a little bit more humility in it. And I thought, well, look, I'm not saying read this book and you'll double your profits overnight or you'll suddenly become the best leader in the world. All I'm saying is this is what I've done. You can learn from things both good and bad. And at the end of each chapter, just stop and have a think. You might not agree with what I say, but just stop and ponder on it. And, you know, if you agree with it, adopt it, great, and use it. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. I'm not here saying, you know, these are the, you know, the sort of the baked Alaska commandments of being a successful leader.
Yeah.
Some people might not agree with it all. And if they don't, they don't. That's fine.
No, I love that format of the points to ponder. Really, really good. So, what would you say to people, and you may have a story maybe where you've experienced bad leadership in inverted commas. So, what would you say to people who are dealing with, they're part of a team maybe or whatever, and they're dealing with really frustrating leadership? Excuse me. What would you say to those people, and what have you done perhaps when you've been in that situation?
I think sometimes, you know, they've got to have a little bit of patience. I'm not saying that, you know, if it's a really toxic environment, they should just accept it and get on with it. Although it's difficult, you know, because it's people's jobs and people's careers usually. And, you know, if you rock the boat, you might end up out of a job. So it's a very, very difficult situation for people. And, you know, the great example that has just come out recently is Brewdog. You know, a great modern new company, a disruptor in the beer market, great products that they've delivered, you know, great messages, you know, really unusual marketing, you know, lots of PR generation, good for the environment, the green footprint and all of that. And then all of a sudden it comes out that, well, actually, it's not really like that on the inside. You know, there's, I think, 300 employees have now signed an open letter talking about how it's a cult of personality and bullying. And you know, I talk about in the book the Illuminati, and the Illuminati
Yeah.
for me is where you get a small group within an organization who want to control everything. They
Yeah.
make all the decisions, they keep the decisions to themselves. It's very difficult to penetrate that group. And
Yeah.
it sounds as if there was very much an Illuminati at the heart of Brewdog, where, you know, the two founders and a select number of acolytes controlled everything, you know, and made decisions and didn't really communicate with people. And, you know, I'm sure maybe in the future Brewdog will become a bit of a a study. I actually think it's a great opportunity for them. I
Yeah.
think, James Watt, has got a great opportunity to address it and try and turn it around. Now, how successful he'll be with that, I don't know. But it is difficult in that type of environment. It needs someone typically quite brave to stand up and, point out the obvious. It's a bit like the emperor's new clothes, isn't it?
Yeah.
I use a few examples from fairy stories and things in the
It's
book
great.
because there's
Yeah.
usually a bit of wisdom in them. And, the emperor's new clothes is very much like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone thinks, his clothes are fine and he looks dandy and he looks great. And it's only because there's a less inhibited, courageous little boy who puts his hand up and says, actually, he's got nothing on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everyone knows he's got nothing on and the game's up. It's
Yeah.
possibly a little bit like that in companies like we've seen with Brewdog and other companies down the years where someone eventually just puts a hand up and says, well, no, actually, it's not right. It's not like that. And in this
Yeah.
case, the 300 people who have joined in to echo that. So,
Yeah.
I hope that the Brewdog situation is a bit of a Harvey Weinstein moment, if you like, where
Yeah.
it suddenly enables and empowers people to actually speak out about things that they've previously been unable to speak out about, and I hope that's the case. Because there's a bit in the book. I mean, I'm not going to refer to loads of pages, but it's only a relatively small bit of the book, and it might be something that maybe in the future I'll expand on. But at the end of the leadership section, there's a bit which people aren't going to be able to see this too well, but you can see the hazard warning sign. It's dark triad leadership, it's called, and it's how there's these traits around psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism, and how you get that in organizations. And I have seen it. I've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's awful, and it's not healthy, and it's something I've always tried to speak out a little bit against myself, but at the end of the day, everyone's got bills to pay and a career, so you can't always do that.
Yeah. And
So
what would you say if somebody is either they're a new founder and they're thinking, they love this idea of great leadership, bringing people along, or maybe they're in an organization and they're new to leadership, maybe they've been promoted into like a team leader role or something like that. What would you say to them as a place to get started in their leadership journey with, even if it's a team of, maybe they've only got a team of 6, 8, 10? Where would you say, other than obviously reading your book, which is a great place to start?
That was going to be the flippant answer, of course. Read this book. It's here, everyone. Read this book, and you might not agree with everything, but it'll give you a good blueprint. But I think one of the things you've got to take a step back before that, and you've got to take you've got to put some responsibility on the shoulders of the people who make appointments, because people do get promoted or moved into leadership positions when they're not ready or they're not suited. But who turns down a promotion and more money sort of thing? I want you to be the manager of this team. Oh, great. Will you get paid more? I'm going to do it. And then that person isn't equipped to actually do it. So I think a big responsibility lies further up the hierarchy of the organization with the established leaders there. Now, in some instances, obviously, you're going to get dark triad leaders there, and they're going to perpetuate that process. But responsibility lies there. Leadership is important. It's important for the individual, and it's very, very important for the people they lead. Get it wrong, and the severe impacts. One of the things that's come out recently in the last few years is a much more open discussion about anxiety, stress, mental health issues. Once upon a time, it was keep the lid on all of that stuff, and boys don't cry, and and I think it's really encouraging now that type of thing can be discussed more openly. And sometimes that's because either someone is put into a leadership position that they're unable to really deliver against, and that puts pressure on themselves, and it can cause the leader to be unwell. Or, if they're not equipped for that role, then the way they prosecute that role can lead to issues for the rest of the team and create anxiety and issues there. So, it's not always about the individual and their style. It's about the people who are making the decisions on who should be the leaders that need to think better about that. And it's not always about just appointing people in your same image. If you're a very, very hard-nosed, driven, focused salesperson who's pretty much just focused on the numbers and not on the people, and you keep appointing people who are similar to you, then yes, in the short term, you might have great sales numbers. But in the long term, you're going to end up with a lot of, disillusioned and unhappy people. and
Yeah,
you're
for
probably not
sure.
going to be as successful in the long term. So, I mean, everything that gets discussed about sort of diversity and inclusion is genuinely important, because you need different thought processes, you need different types of thinking and different approaches, because that's how a team thrives. And
Yeah,
if you've got the fundamentals of team building in there, which the reference in the book is Patrick Lencioni's work, which I think is excellent. He says that the fundamental element of a successful team is trust.
yeah,
And if you ain't got trust between the people, then you're not going to be able to then resolve agreements and get alignment and all go after achieving the same goals. If
yeah,
the people don't trust each other, it's just not going to happen.
yeah,
So trust, and the other word for me that always goes with it is transparency, openness, sharing, some information obviously has to be kept, to a select few, confidential information and things. Obviously, you can't just have an open book on everything in an organization, but you've got to have, a good level of transparency where people are open with each other and share, because that's the way that they'll trust each other.
yeah. Brilliant. And one of the things, I guess, because this is topical, and because obviously you're an Englishman, we can talk about this. So one of the books I've read, which is really good, was Matthew Said's Rebel Ideas, and I've just read an article actually about this in relation to England's success now in the Euros, and how they, it used to be seen in football where you only had football people in the room, and obviously men in the room, talking about football ideas, and it would become this echo chamber of ideas, because effectively they all had the same ideas, and this made them feel good because they're just bouncing ideas off each other. Whereas in recent times, they've actually brought in really diverse thinking, from a range of different backgrounds. And I think one idea was Sir Clive Woodward being appointed like assistant,
At
whatever, coach or
Southampton, I
something
think,
at
wasn't it?
Southampton,
Yeah, yeah.
and how there was uproar. How can a rugby person come in? But what do you think about that? About bringing diverse thinking and creating those sort of ideas, and what's your thoughts on England's success? Even though they haven't won it yet, by the way, but
No,
what's your thoughts on their success?
they haven't won it. We are a nation that often celebrates sort of grand failure, don't we? But fingers crossed for Sunday, obviously.
Yeah, for sure,
Um,
for sure.
I think for me, and this again, it's another thing going right back to my P&G origins, is knowledge, skills, and attitude. Performance breaks down into knowledge, skills, and attitude. You need to have a knowledge and an understanding of what you're doing, the job you're doing, the sport you're playing. If someone doesn't understand the rules of football, then they're always going to be offside and they're always going to be fouling people and they're not going to be any good. So you've got knowledge, you've got skills, and some skills tend to be kind of almost innate. People are born with skills in certain areas, but they still, no matter who you are, they still need to be developed. The Messis and the Ronaldos spend hours and hours on the training pitch. They're not just completely gifted footballers who can, do whatever they want, for the rest of the week and then just turn it on in 90 minutes. They practice and they train and they work on those skills and marginal gains and all of that. So you've got your knowledge, and typically knowledge can be acquired in a lot of ways, but some people have a thirst for knowledge and an ability to absorb knowledge more than others. Some people have more natural and innate skills, and others have to work really hard on them, and the very, very best do both. They've got the innate skills and they work really hard on them. There's that theory, isn't it? Is it 330 hours or something? In 10 years, you've got to put 330 hours of practice into, I can't remember the exact number, but
10,
it's out
10,000
there if
hours,
you
is it?
Google it.
Yeah,
10,000 hours, whatever it
yeah,
is. Yeah,
yeah,
330 is not much, is it? 10,000 hours or whatever it is. And then you've got attitude.
yeah,
And attitude can make a whole world of difference. How you think, how you act, how you behave. You know,
yeah,
if you take for granted that most footballers know the rules, then you get some with more skill and some with less skill, etc. So then it comes down to attitude. If you've got really innate skills, you really work hard and develop them, and you put 100% effort in every single game, then you're going to do really well, aren't you?
yeah, yeah,
Then you get, the type we've all heard of, the lazy footballer. Oh, he's got the ability, he's got all the technique in his locker, but he just doesn't put the effort in, doesn't run enough, he's too lazy.
yeah,
And that attitude can make a huge difference. And sometimes, certainly initially in a career, the attitude, the enthusiasm, the energy, the behavior, the will to succeed, that can actually, in the early stage, at times be more important than the knowledge and the skills, because the knowledge will build over time. You'll absorb it, and the skills will be trained and developed over time. But if you've got someone with just a first class attitude,
Yeah.
then they'll go really far initially. If all they end up with is the positive attitude and the skills and knowledge doesn't build, then they're going to hit a ceiling and they're going to struggle to get beyond that. But I've always said, I would sooner I would sooner have someone whose knowledge and skills I can work on and develop than someone who maybe is really clever, really smart, really skillful, but needs a boot up the backside to get them to do anything.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
found that type of person far more frustrating.
And do you think the attitude of the England squad at present is in a better place? How has Gareth Southgate played that? Do you think, is it a lot to do with attitude, or other things as well?
I think it's probably attitude. I mean, technically man for man, I don't think the current England squad is probably as good as the golden generation, as it was called, with your Lampards and Gerrards and Rooneys, Ashley Coles, etc., Rio Ferdinands. I think the squad probably technically is probably maybe not as good, but it just seems to have more of a team ethos around it. There seems to be less ego, and I think you've got to attribute all of that to the manager, really, and the way he's brought them together and developed them.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a real superstar in the England team at the
yeah,
moment. And I'm not saying that a superstar always creates issues, because I mean, Ronaldo's been incredibly successful, Messi's been incredibly successful, but I think the England team is a little bit more of a team. And what's interesting is I think the Italians are probably the same as well. I don't
yeah,
think there's a standout superstar in their team.
yeah.
So it'll probably be a dull and boring match on Sunday. It might be extra time with penalties, but
And it may be
fingers
surprising here.
crossed.
I'm not actually that interested in football, but I do get it. I do get into big tournaments, but as you can tell, I'm fascinated by all sports, and that's one of the reasons I love the book, because obviously there is a good number of references to sport in it as well, which I love, and I'm just fascinated by the people side of sport as well, because it can be a mirror of how we can interact, not just in business but in our lives as well. The discipline, like the Ronaldo documentary, is fascinating. Like exactly what you say, a skilled person will not make it without the extreme discipline that they have. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. But Steve, I'm conscious of your time. I know you're a very busy man, and you've got your banner in the background. So let's move on to talk about what you do now. Tell us all about what you do now, and how do you help businesses at this time?
Yeah, it's something I'm really enjoying. As I said at the start, from spending my life working for big companies, traveling the length and breadth of the UK to meet customers, and I'm now working much closer to home. Typically, a long journey for me is about 20 miles now, which I used to do about 40,000 miles a year and take God knows how many trains and planes. So I'm really, really enjoying working much closer to home. I'm really enjoying being able to pass on my learning experience directly to local businesses where I can. As a business doctor, what we do is essentially coach, consult, whatever you want to call it, but we work with local businesses to effectively help them get a new plan and a new strategy. And I don't want to get too embroiled in discussions of what strategy is and isn't. At the end of the day, I just think of strategy again as something quite simple. It's about making the right choices to grow your business and achieve your vision or where you want to get to. It's about choices and helping business owners know what choices are available to them and what are the right choices to make is something that's really, really gratifying and something that I'm really enjoying. And as part of that, I'm also involved with working at the local Chamber of Commerce and helping people who are currently on benefits to get onto what's called the New Enterprise Programme, which provides business coaching and support and some financial support to help them set up their own businesses. And again, that's brilliant. I mean, I'm working with a lot of single mums who, are looking after kids and can't take a full-time job because of the childcare limitations, but they've got ideas and aspirations to set up their own business and
Brilliant.
be able to run a business around looking after the children. And that's brilliant. I feel, incredibly sort of gratified helping people in that scenario, or the guy who has suddenly been made redundant but for years has been a great carpenter and suddenly thinks, right, okay, I'm going to put all this carpentry that I've basically self-taught, I'm going to go out and use that skill and set up my own business. And that's really really rewarding as well. So
Brilliant.
I'm not averse to working outside of my area within the constraints of Business Doctors because it's a regional franchise. But bigger companies and corporates and that, I'm more than happy to go back and help them, particularly on the leadership side of things, and maybe do some reference to the book and that as it gets out there. But I am enjoying working locally, I must admit.
Great. And if somebody was intrigued by the work you do, where would be the best place to find you?
If they Google Business Doctors or Steve Smith Business Doctor or Business Doctor Steve Smith, then you'll get to the website and be able to find me. We've got business doctors all over the UK. There's a chap who covers Ireland as well, John Nelligan. So, we've got business doctors pretty much you can cover everywhere. And if people want to look us up, either me personally or the other chaps in their area, then they can get that through the website.
Brilliant.
Doctors.co.uk.
Brilliant. And then in terms of the book, I'm guessing we can find the book at all our usual outlets and that big famous bookstore online. I'm guessing it will hold it as well.
Yes, that's the main one, to be fair. It's on Book Depository as well and starting to appear in a few other places now as well. But, whether you like Amazon, whether you like Jeff Bezos or not, it's an incredible business and an incredibly convenient service. And that's the easiest place to get it. But if people do want to seek me out and get in touch directly, I have got copies that I can send out to people, sign them if they really want it. And that's where we'll go. But the final thing I'd say about the book is, and it's a bit of a joke I've been saying to people, that if I just sit back a little bit, you might be able to see I've got the book on the
right. Yeah.
So I've maybe gone about it the wrong way. I've written the
Brilliant.
book, I've got the T-shirt. I'm just now hoping that someone from Hollywood will come in with a lucrative offer for the film rights. And
Brilliant. Love it.
And we'll see where we get to on that one.
Well, there's definitely amazing stories in it. It's entertaining. It's highly creative as well, which can't be said about many leadership books, really. I mean, you have a great creative, just even the titles of the chapters, the way it's structured, I think is brilliant. So it definitely encourage people to go and check it out. But see, I feel as if we could talk all day about this subject of leadership, and we didn't even really get onto the strategy. That's a whole different section, the strategy of business as well. So brilliant stuff, Steve. Thank you so much. And if you've any parting wisdom to share, please go ahead.
No, nothing as such. Just bring everyone back to the basics that I said, just about how you treat people. There's no need to be rude and discourteous. That quote that you pulled out, which is very, very powerful, the one from the female lead. Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. And if everybody adopted that, I think the world would be a better place at times.
Brilliant. Love it, Steve. Thank you so much. And we'll leave it there. And no doubt we'll be in touch again very soon. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks
a lot.
Richard.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.